Good evening. At church, I just keep doing that until everybody says good morning. So Sunday mornings, if it's quiet and I say good morning and everybody just kind of looks at me, I just keep doing it until I know everybody's fully engaged. So, good evening. Good morning. Engaged but confused. It's kind of like dazed and confused. Well, I truly want to welcome you here tonight. I know many of you have busy schedules, have traveled a good distance to be here, but I am positive that this 2 hours tonight will be well worth your time, every single second of it. How do I know that? I know that because every so often today, my phone would begin to buzz. Bob, sorry, I cannot make it tonight. Okay, I understand. About another hour. Bob, sorry, I cannot make it tonight. And on and on. And I knew that was the enemy's attack to stop this tonight. But I also knew this. Those who would be here tonight are hungry. Those who would make this trek tonight, there's already something embedded in your hearts, in your minds. You've already been thinking about church multiplication. There's already been that seed. You've already been processing and asking questions and trying to discern and figure out, what does this church planting look like? How can it happen? You may have even begun to weigh out some things in your mind like, well, I don't see us being able to do it financially. I don't see us being able to do it staff-wise. I'm already, as a pastor, overwhelmed, and maybe the list goes on and on. So what I really hope tonight, as we went around on the zone tour, and I shared with you about this night and asked you bring your church boards, your laity, your leadership. What I really hope that happens tonight is that you see from a panel of 5 or 6 that we have here tonight, as they share their heart and what they are doing currently in church planting and what they're planning on doing in the future, that you are inspired to go out and do the same. And I too was one of those who felt like at times that church planting was an impossible mission until 3 church plants later in a church of less than 100, I realized, wow, I spent hardly no money, I've lost no people, and we've gained an influence of spreading the gospel like I just never dreamed possible. And so tonight is the night where you will hear hearts of pastors and maybe lay people who will be in full gauge ministry soon, who are actively involved in it. I have a few things I want to share with you here. There's a book called 5, and it's the number 5 and then IVE. It's by Alan Hirsch. You can go to his website and literally download this book. Okay, it's an incredible book, and I downloaded it, printed it off, put it in a binder. And this is what a little section, paragraph here says. It says, as we pressed, they went around and they were looking for 10 churches that was really doing church planting big, okay, experts. As we pressed into our exponential 2015 theme of igniting a culture of multiplication, our team set out to identify 10 radically multiplying U.S. churches, just 10 that we could highlight and learn from. With more than 350,000 churches in the United States, that 10 represents just 0.003% of the churches. We spent months searching for them, but we couldn't find 10. Wow. Out of 350,000 churches, they couldn't find 10 that was doing church planting on a radical level. He says, we spent months searching for them, but we couldn't find 10. We couldn't even find 3. Wow. And then you sit on the Great Commission. The reason the whole church exists in the first place is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ and to multiply, right? Couldn't even find 3. Ezekiel 22:30 says, I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found no one. This is just hitting me like a ton of bricks. And I don't want to stand before the Lord someday and say, but I was so busy, but I planted nothing. But I was so busy that I won no one. And I got to be so careful, because sometimes I can communicate things and people they'll take it as I'm condemning, but I'm not. I mean, this is coming from a place of a broken heart. That's something that the Lord has done in my life when it comes to church multiplication. And I hope that this kind of just sits with you a little bit throughout this process tonight as we think about church planting, that the Lord searches the north and to the south and to the east and to the west for men and women who are serious about multiplication, are serious about spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. We'll put agendas and excuses aside to win some to Jesus. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that he'll do anything. To the weak he'll become weak, to the strong he'll become strong, to the Jews he'll be like the Jews, right? He says, I'll do all this. I'll become all things that I might win some. Let's pray. Father, this is our plea tonight. That you'd pour into us. I know this panel that's going to sit here tonight, Father, their heart is pounding to the beat of multiplication. And I know that pleases you. And so tonight, Father, I just pray that God, that in everything that we do, that we would just release you. That our story would not be about us individually, but it would be about the kingdom, the advancement of the gospel, the glory of your grace that sets the captives free. Father, do a new work with this group right here. They're the ones that came. They're the ones that are hungry. There was no excuses. Nothing could stop them. And this is the army that you will use. Father, let us enter into District Assembly this coming year with testimony after testimony. Let us flood the pastoral reports with testimonies of multiplication. Start a fire right here with these that are here tonight, Lord. I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. So our panel tonight, as I shared with you, those of you, and by the way, some of you may not know me. I am Bob Miller. I pastor the Austin Nazarene Church. Been there 8 years and have newly appointed Director of Church Planning. And this is my passion. And hopefully it becomes all of yours as well if it's not already. So tonight we'll have a panel, as I shared, of some pastors who are doing this or have been doing it or involved in it in some way. And the beautiful thing is some stories are similar and some of them are completely unique and different in their own individual way. So I want to call some up who, I'm going to call them all up here, get them seated, and we're going to give them 10 to 15 minutes or so to share their testimony with you. And I've also asked them to share maybe how much money they've invested, how much time they've invested, how much their laity may have invested into the vision of church planting, and just so on and so on. I'm just going to let them share their heart. And then at the end, we're going to give you time for questions and answers, okay? Because I think tonight, that is one of the most important things that we can do, is to leave plenty of time for you to ask the questions. That's what this whole night is truly geared for. So you're welcome to stop them in the middle of their speech too if you want. But I just give you a heads up that we have plenty of time at the end for this as well. So I'm just going to go down the line. Kevin Sterrett from Common Ground, you come on up. Take the second seat. Any seat, sorry, please. Yeah. And then we're going to have Marshall from Crossroads. He is here, one of the church plant pastors. Tim Fisher cannot be with us tonight. Terry Hallbegger from Trinity. Paul Dezay from Muncie Southside. Muncie Southside. Elias, he is our Hispanic church plant director. And then Jill Waltz, who is the children's pastor, correct? Not anymore. Okay.
Yes.
You're like the lead.
Freelance.
Oh, freelance. Yes. You said you got promoted. Well, maybe she's gonna take Gary's place or something. I don't know.
That's right.
There is a season for everything, isn't
That's
there?
right.
Okay, so actually I think I'm going to start down with Kevin and work this way. So I'm going to pass this down and then...
It's plenty, man. My name is Kevin Sterrett. I pastor at Common Ground over in Decatur. We kept bumping on some pretty hard ceilings. And I don't want to throw numbers at that other than, you know, our ceilings are not your ceilings and your ceilings aren't ours. But we had bounced off a pretty hard ceiling about over a 5-year period, 3 specific times. And I was really confident that the ceiling we were dealing with was the multi-congregational ceiling. My folks didn't even know the language, you know. They were frustrated like I was frustrated. And so we began talking. And about a year ago, we put in front of them, we had gone to prayer, me and the staff, and we were really confident of where we needed to go. We had worked for several weeks in laying out the details of how it needed to work. And we put in front of the board the idea of becoming a congregation of congregations. That we had identified 3 primary fishing ponds that we had seen develop over the last few years. And we wanted to talk about making sure that we were fishing those ponds, not just being happy that there were a lot of fish in them, right? And so when we ran the analysis, we knew that our Sunday morning was being capped off by not just the social dynamic of the ceiling in worship, but also our children's ministries. We have a very strong children's ministry, so our ratio is about 33% on Sunday morning are going to be folks who are associated with children's ministry. So it's a huge group for us. We were capping out the rest of the building, so we were running against that bridge and a couple others. And so we put in front of them this idea of launching a second service, but launching it as a second church. Not just to start a congregation for everybody, but to ask the congregation to be praying if they were willing to be part of a church plant inside of the church, that they would give up their normal service. And we didn't want everyone. We told most of the folks, you have to stay where you're at. We were looking for about 30 people to join us with the goal of reaching 100 people for Christ new to the church in the coming year. Now, at that point, we were running about 240, 250, so it seemed like kind of a crazy number to throw out there, but it's what the Lord had put in our mind. And so we're like, well, the only person that's going to be embarrassed about it's Jesus, so we might as well just put it out there because he's not going to let up on it anyway, right? And so we did, and people said we were crazy, so we identified we're going to start a second worship, but we're going to plant a church, not just split the congregation up. And the second one is a biker church, and the third one is a sports church. I was reading through our original plans this morning and realized that in really type A fashion, I had estimated we could pull all three off in somewhere between a year to 3 years. And now I'm recognizing, no. 1 a year is plenty to kill everybody, so just slow down. And so we haven't started the biker church yet. We've got the leadership team in place. People are praying. And we haven't started the sports church yet. We've done some of the initial planning that we did, and we've done it, and it didn't work. Okay, so the Lord said, don't do that. They're still looking at that. But a couple cool things that I wanted to highlight happened. Number one, this is October, whatever the date is, October the 4th, 5th. At the beginning of September, we had already surpassed the 100 people, which for us was amazing, right? Now, we didn't count on the fact that we were going to lose some folks in the middle of that, and that people show up, every other week, not every week. So some of our initial estimates of that 100 people has impacted our worship by 50, right? But it was because, I believe it was because we had a group of about 30 people who started. We did prayer meetings like we were starting a church. We did concentric circles of concern and started people talking about who are in your influence circles and who we're going to start praying for. And those folks just started, they just started inviting people, right? And so, but what happened in the congregation then was they heard us talking about the idea that we're now really focused on evangelism. We want to create a culture of evangelism. You said a culture of multiplication. I like that. One of the things I learned working with Daryl when we were back doing consulting and strategic planning was that planning really gets you, it does nothing for you other than get you prepared for the unplanned, right? So you get your heart pointed in the right direction, but usually God's will is in the peripheral vision. You think He's taking you here, and if you hadn't been aimed in that direction, you would have missed the peripheral vision, right? So like we had a meeting this morning in my office. These crazy people want to start a cowboy church, right? And I'm like, we never talked, sorry, that's not in our plan. We can't do that, right? They've already got 20 to 30 people who aren't in the church who are part of their, horse kind of stuff that they do. And we're having to slow them down. She's already started promoting those people. We're starting a cowboy church and the board hasn't even heard about it, right? So it's one of the cool things I think about this is that it's not necessary that your plans are perfect because none of it works. Usually everything you put on paper, it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to. That's God's business. But what happens culturally, though, is when you're willing to talk about it and not be afraid to fail at what God's telling you to do. You just put it out there. It's impossible, but God said do it, so you're going to have to deal with it, right? And then He comes along and He does something that you weren't expecting. And then you have what's happening with us is we've got these groups that are now thinking like multipliers. You got to remind them there's a process for approval, right? That kind of thing. You don't want to slow them down too much because you don't want to discourage them, but you don't, you also got to make sure that their leadership structures and that stuff are in place. But that's kind of our story. I mean, there's a lot that we tried that didn't work. There's a lot that's happening we never planned for. But we just really felt like, for us, we recognized there's some social dynamics where in one service, they're going to get comfortable. They just quit inviting. And so at some point, you've got to multiply where it just doesn't work. And we're just watching God do some neat stuff. I don't know where it's going to end up. I hope the biker church actually happens. I don't know. Maybe it won't. I know I'm really confident a cowboy church is, and I don't even know what a cowboy church is, right? And I really don't even know what the sports church looks like. I really don't. I know of churches who are doing it. I don't have a clue of how to put it together other than I know when we started praying, that's what the Lord told us to put on paper. And so I guess my encouragement would be, please don't wait until you got it figured out. It doesn't matter anyway. Put some pretty good plans on paper and recognize none of it's going to work. And just get yourself pointed in the direction God's taken you. And then keep your peripheral vision open for God to bring to you things that you never planned on, never expected. And in my experience, those are the things that work anyway. And so it really is just a matter of getting yourself lined up where God's pointing you and just recognize He's not usually specific with you on the front end. Don't be afraid. It'll cost you some time. I mean, we spent several months planning. A lot of what we did worked, but a lot of what we put on paper didn't work. It didn't matter. I think our biggest expense, we put in a digital soundboard so that if we were doing multiple services, we knew that we couldn't have the same soundboard we had. That really was the only expense, right? Cowboy church, I don't know what they need, a shovel. Maybe I have no clue. going to be interesting. Pitchfork, plugs for the noses, I don't know. Anyway, that's it. It's cool. We're watching God work, and I don't have a clue what I'm doing. That's just the honest truth, and that's cool. Just let God do it.
Well, hello. My name is Marshall. Like Bob said, I am here with Crossroads Community Church. I'm here representing Tim Fisher. He's our lead pastor. He's turning 40 tonight, so he's at home praying, I think, coming to grips with that. But it's really great for me to be here because where I'm at right now, I'm 4 weeks into being the campus pastor of a brand new church. We launched on September 12th, September 10th. And it's been a journey so far, but I am very clueless as well. So I don't have much to offer. I'm here to learn from you guys just as much as everyone else is. But when I think about it, really all that I have to share, I think, is my story. At this time last year, I was very, very comfortably working at Olivet as an admissions counselor, recruiting your students probably, having a great time, and not really looking to do this. Didn't have really any passion for church planting, if I'm being completely honest. Just never crossed my mind. I was looking a little bit into what do I want to do next. I knew ministry was in the future, but I thought, well, I should probably get more schooling. So I actually called Tim, Pastor Tim, and said, hey, I'm thinking about going to grad school. Can we get together and talk about you being a reference for me, that sort of thing? And we got together, and he said, hey, we're wanting to plant a church. Why don't you come work for me instead? And I was like, I feel like I've just been tricked here. This is not what I was going for. But I had a lot of questions. Maybe like you guys do. Why? Why in the first place would we want to plant a church? Crossroads seems to be doing pretty well. Why do we need to plant a church in the city of Mishawaka? Are you sure I'm the right guy? Are you sure? I have no experience in this, by the way. A lot of questions like this. So we started this journey of having conversations. And Tim started to pitch this vision that he was very adamant about. And because I said, why? Why are we planning a church? He said, we're thinking about Mishawaka. And I said, why? What's the thinking behind that? And he kind of laughed and just said, I don't have a great answer other than we just know that this is what God wants us to do, which is really the best answer, and sometimes can be difficult when we think, well, I really want to have like a great reason and all of these different things, but man, if God wants you to do it, that's what I've found out is you should probably do it, and that was very true in my life. So that's the vision, and he started to tell me, we have a campus down in Warsaw, Indiana, and that is at that point was a little over a year old. We have a Spanish ministry that meets on Sunday afternoons in our building, and so that's another campus within a campus that we have, completely Hispanic-speaking church there. And then we're also starting at this time last year was probably just a few months old, but in Elkhart, Indiana, we're starting basically a church, but it's a very different model. It's much more urban setting, and at this point, it's really a Tuesday night Bible study that is growing from the ground up. Has looked very different than our church in Mishawaka, but so things are happening, and I could see that when Tim was talking to me. I could see, okay, things are happening here in northern Indiana, and it's very clear that God's working, that God is propelling this mission. And so I decided, yeah, this is what I feel like God wants me to be a part of too. Again, feeling completely like I have no idea what I'm doing. Completely like I am probably not the right guy for the job, but I read a lot of Moses and he felt the same way, so I thought that might be okay. Anyway, fast forward a few months, I moved then to Mishawaka in June, and in the months leading up to that, we started to look for a venue. We knew we wanted to plant a church in the city of Mishawaka, but we knew we didn't want to be on the north side of town. There's a very large church up there, non-denominational church. And that's in the nice, rich part of town. But right downtown, we thought there's not a ton of churches there, and so we really felt drawn to that area, and we looked at some different venues. I was really on board for this movie theater. I thought that would be really cool. I knew that we didn't want to be a church that just took people from other churches. We didn't want to steal people who were just tired of the church they were going to. We wanted to be a church for people who didn't feel comfortable going to church in the first place. We wanted to be a church for people who maybe they had a bad experience, maybe they just didn't feel comfortable walking through the door. So I thought, well, a movie theater, everybody's comfortable walking through a movie theater. And that was one of our options. We were going down that road, but then we made a phone call to this community center in downtown Mishawaka, and they took our message. I mean, I think Pastor Tim just left a message. He gets a call back a few days later from the park superintendent who runs this community center. And he said, hey, got your message, loved the idea, talked to the mayor, to the city council, to everybody. They're all on board for you guys renting out our auditorium on Sunday mornings. And I'll maybe talk about this more if I can, but this was one of the biggest blessings because to this day, we have an amazing, amazing relationship with the city of Mishawaka, and that's been just a gift from God from the very beginning because they just keep giving us stuff without us asking for it. They really, really blessed us financially with the rental agreement and just so many things that it's very clear that this is exactly where we're supposed to be. So we spent all summer getting ready. Every single day I went to work thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I have no idea what today is going to lead to. I have no idea what next week's going to look like. But leading up to it, we spent a lot of time in the community. We would go to a lot of parks and do cookouts and just try and engage with the people of the city and let them know, hey, we're planning a church and we'd love for you to come if you're interested, if you don't have a place that you're attending. And we did other things. We sent out some postcards. We other Facebook campaigns, things like that. But more than anything else, being in the community, being just with people, giving them a free hot dog and a bag of chips, and having a 5-minute conversation with them has led to a lot of them walking through our doors these last 4 weeks, which has been amazing to see. And what I've learned is that we just have to be proximate to the people that we want to reach. It's absolutely impossible to plant a church and just sit there and hope that people come. I've learned that we really have to go out and be next to people and talk to them and tell them what we're doing. So September 10th was our first launch. We did 5 practice services the 5 weeks before that. And those were a hot mess. And because again, we had no idea what we were doing, but we learned a lot in those 5 weeks. We made a lot of changes, and when September 10th came around, we opened up our doors, and people just started coming in. And it was cool to see, hey, we met you in the park. We met you at this event that we were at. And just blew my mind what God was doing. So, like I said, we're 4 weeks in now. This Sunday will be our 5th Sunday. And we're starting to look to the future. We're starting to try and figure out what else we can be doing to take the next step, to keep our foot on the gas, because the easiest thing to do at this point is to coast and to start to realize, okay, we have a group of people who now call this church their home. We have volunteers, we have a kids ministry, and it would be really easy to just coast and to settle. But we don't want to do that because we realize there's a lot more people who maybe they don't even know it, but they're looking for something in their life. They're looking for something. Maybe they don't know that's God right now. I think it is. And I think that we need to do everything we can to make it easy for them to be able to walk through our doors. So we're starting prayer groups. That we had our very first one last night, which is really great. I feel very adamant that the very first thing that we can do outside of a Sunday morning service is get together as a church and pray. And that's what I told our group last night. We had about 10 people show up at the basement of the community center, and we just prayed for our church, prayed for guidance, prayed for direction, prayed for our city, prayed for our country. And by the end of it, we were just like, I think that this is the most important thing we can do as a church. And so, we're looking at things down the road like a youth ministry, trying to get that off the ground, trying to do, a lot of things. And I just, when I think about it too much, I get overwhelmed because it's just been crazy. But I think the one big takeaway that I have is I know without a doubt that God's leading this. I know without a doubt that this is where He's called me, and I just have to continue to lean into Him, to do and to be and to just to follow Him, and trust that He's going to do it. And really, He's just asking us to step out in faith and to show up and to be faithful, and He's going to do the rest. So, yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I'm going to be that guy that's going to use a podium. Right? So, because I wasn't always a senior pastor, I was a youth pastor, and I know that if I don't have some kind of an illustration, then you guys will never remember it. So I brought something with me to show where we are at. I first want to say that Bob hit it right on the head when he says that we're a church of multiplication, not replication. So in other words, you don't have to look exactly like any of us. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't look like what we look like, or even we don't have to look like what you look like. But we are called for sure to multiply. So let me show you something here. This is not really vanilla yogurt, but we got this from our church pantry. So I want to show you something. With what we're doing right now in our churches, how do we measure? And you guys better have the right answer, all right, because you guys are leaders in the church. How do we measure the church right now usually? Now, we don't like to talk about it, but what do we usually do to see if a church is growing or not growing? What do we measure? It's usually two things. Numbers. All right, people, right? All right. So, people. Appreciate that. What's the other thing we measure? Dollars, money. Okay? We like to say nickels and noses, right? So what we do then is each of us take our church, whatever our building may look like. All right, apparently our building looks like the Carb Master vanilla yogurt, but your building looks like whatever that building looks like. And then what we try to do is we take people, and we begin to jam them into our church. Okay? With that, we hope that they bring with them money. All right? Because we need both. All right? That's not a bad thing that we count nickels and noses. But then what we do is we put a lid on top of it. And we say, as long as we have enough money, as long as we have enough people, then our church must be doing really well, and we must be growing. Or if some church isn't quite making it financially, or if they don't have as many people as whoever else does, then we say, oh, their church must be in decline. Now, we don't talk about that outside, do we? But I will say that at least in my heart and the circles that we run in, that this is what we talk about. So the problem is that if all that we're counting, and if all that we are judging our churches by is how many people we have and how much money we bring in, at some point, if we have a lot of money and a lot of people, then we either have to go to multi-services or we have to get a different container and expand the building. Now, this is where multiplication happens and not replication. This is either going to go really good or it's going to go really bad. You ready for this? Easy, Doc. Watch out. Sir. What if we do this? What if we take the lid and we make a giant hole in the lid? From that hole, what that does is that will allow both nickels and noses to come out. But wait a minute, if we lose the money, if we lose the people, then this means that our church is in decline. No. If people are coming out, if we take the lid off of what it is that we have capped as leaders, as board members, as pastors, we put the lid on this. If we open the lid and say, you know what, I want to look for people. God, will you bring people in our church that will be able to work in the anointing that you have given them? Then if you bring them to this house, what we will do is we will keep the ceiling open. We will not cap it off. And when we see those leaders begin to come up, not only will we commission them as leaders, but we will give them as much nickels and noses that they need in order to go and multiply what it is that God has called them. Well, what if that leaves your house empty? Then guess what? We become the church planter then, and we start with nothing, and we start all over. This is the mentality that we have here at Trinity. This is what our church board, this is what our church leadership, this is what it is that we have tried to do. Because the problem was this, is at Trinity, we're at a point where we're really comfortable. We've got enough nickels, we can keep the lights on, we can pay staff, and we've got enough noses, we know each other. But the problem is that we put a cap on it, and so who are we commissioning to go out and go make more disciples? So this is what we are doing. Now this is what happened. For us, there's a guy by the name of Nick. Nick and his friends, they're in their 30s, 30, 31, 32 years old, something like that. They are the old youth group of Trinity. Some of you in here may know who they are. Nick came to me and he said, Pastor, he came to me about a year ago, and he said, is it okay if on a Friday night that we gather together and we play the music that we grew up with, which is different than what we do on a Sunday morning. And he said, and with that, he says, we'll have a Bible study and then we'll be open to new people. In fact, we want to invite our friends to come to this. I said, well, this sounds wonderful to me. And in my head, I'm like, I wonder how that's really going to go off. I wonder what's going to happen. Well, they launched it and they started. When they started, there was just a handful of people. But when we lifted the roof, I never saw Nick. I saw Nick as our guitar player on Sunday morning. I didn't realize Nick had an anointing for worship. Then, with him came a 19-year-old at the time, I think he's 20 or 21 now, from Grace College. His name is Josh. Josh, I saw him as our bass player. If I kept the lid on it, he was our bass player on a Sunday morning. When the lid came off, that boy, that young man, does the Bible study that I would give him the pulpit anytime on Sunday morning. He's studying to be a teacher. He has an anointing to teach. What they do is they go through a music set. It's a setting much like this. They just have tables and chairs. It's real just easy, laid back. And what happens is they play through a set of music. Josh gets up. He does a Bible study with them, and people are engaging with him. Then from there, then they just kind of, then it's all over. But it's everyone that's around 30 to maybe 40 years old or so. And all their kids are just running around. I mean, it's totally different than what we would do on a Sunday morning. But you know what? Every time that I go to this, there's new people coming to it. And the really awesome part is, we want to launch them out. We want them to eventually, when they're ready, as we continue to train them, when we're ready, and when they're ready, is to launch them out. But right now, there's probably at least 10%, maybe 15%, perhaps more, of our Sunday morning crew, Nickels and Noses, that go to that on Friday night. And as I look around at the people, I don't know who's tithing what, and I don't care, but I can kind of guess that that's leadership, that's leadership, that's leadership. There's a board member, there's another board member. And I feel like what God is telling me here at Trinity is, Terry, will you give me your first 10%? I'm like, Lord, take them. Take them. And then from there, now that was about a year ago, and this has been going strong, and we're training up Nick and his crew, and things are going great. I think on some nights, there could be up to 50 people show up. Do you know who they invite? They invite people that they won't invite on Sunday morning, and the people show up. And the people show up. And they're making disciples, and that's awesome. So then from there, I'm noticing that sitting inside Trinity are some folks that are very qualified in ministry. They come from a ministry background, whether they be in missions or whether they just be even doing ministry right now in some other ways. And I'm noticing that they're coming into Trinity. And I begin to ask the Lord, I'm like, Lord, what else are you doing? And I sit down with this guy named Greg. Greg is with us here tonight. Greg and his wife were missionaries in South Africa, and he came and sat in my office, and he's like, I just feel like doing church a different way. And I'm like, I like what you're saying. And he's like, what if we just start it in a house? Yeah, I like what you're saying. So Greg and I have been talking, and we're now in the process of taking and looking at launching with Greg and his wife Teresa and their family, and saying, how can we start another multiplication unit? Then we've got Corey and Mandy. If you know Corey and Mandy, then you will know that they are actually at the church, the Nazarene church up in Garrett. But in Garrett, what they're doing right now is they're running a daycare. But Corey and Mandy, the Lord has brought them to us here at Trinity. And so what we're saying is, you know what? I believe that Jesus is calling for more than a daycare up there. The daycare is bringing in some money. Thank you, Lord, for that. But it's time for that community to have another Nazarene church up there again. And we're looking at Corey and Mandy, so Corey and Mandy has come on board with this too, and we said, you know what? We're going to partner with you guys, and you take as much nickels and noses that you need, because we'll just keep, the more we keep emptying out and leaving this ceiling, we don't put a ceiling on it. I believe with all my heart, I say this, is that I used to be on a staff of a Nazarene church that had 4,000, all right, in the membership. And I will say this, is that I really believe with all my heart that Trinity Church Nazarene can be a church of 4,000. We're just going to do it 100 people at a time, because we're going to keep dumping it out and allowing God to dump more in. So, what does this finally come down to is this, is that by removing I wrote this down, by removing the lid, we risk losing people and money, but that was never the goal in the first place. It was never the goal in the first place, is how much money can we bring in or how big can we get. That was never the goal in the first place. We are here to build the kingdom, not the castle. I've been a part. We're here to build the kingdom and not the castle. And God is bringing people in. I'll say this and then I'll turn the mic over again. Is that as I left on Sunday, I went to Pekin, Illinois to meet with another pastor who is doing a great job of doing church multiplication, because I want to know more about this. I want to know, what are we supposed to do? We've got great folks here, and I can't wait to see what God's going to do with you guys. But I went to Pekin, Illinois, and just before I left, there was another guy in the church that I would have never guessed, ever guessed, that God, is this one of the guys that you're anointing? This guy? This guy? And he comes up to me, and I'm getting ready to head to learn how to do more church multiplication stuff, and he says, he says, I'm really feeling that God is telling me that we should have something in downtown Fort Wayne, down by West Main somewhere. And he said, there's a group of people there that just aren't getting fed, and he said, so we're, not because of West Main, I'm just saying that there's a whole other section, a group of people. And he says, he said, I'm kind of thinking like a coffee shop kind of thing. He says, well, we just play some Christian music and maybe some live bands come in. He says, then once a week we have a church service there. I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good to me. And we're not that big. But the more we keep pouring out, I really believe with all my heart, God's going to keep pouring in. So we believe in multiplication. That's where we're at Trinity. So you don't have to be like us. That's just what God's doing for us. So.
Thank you. All right, I have a question. I'm Paul Dezay, and I'm at Southside in Muncie. But I have a question for you as I get started. What are the obstacles planting churches? What are the obstacles? Anybody? What's that? Knowledge? Okay, that's a good one. What else? What are your obstacles? What's that?
Communication.
Communication. Good. What keeps us from planting churches?
People focus.
People? Focus? Good. Anything else?
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. Yeah. Planting a church is very risky. So I'm brand new to Muncie Southside, and I realized the obstacles. I planted a church in Ohio before moving to Indiana, and I realized the obstacles. So I kind of came in from the perspective of understanding those obstacles. And so how can I eliminate the obstacles at the very beginning of the ministry at Muncie Southside so that we would be able to plant churches? And one of the things that I thought, because of a lot of people view church planting as very risky, you could lose people, you could lose money, that the easiest thing to do would be get a couple quick wins, a couple quick, easy church plants under our belt to be able to communicate to our leadership that this can be done, that we could create a culture of multiplication in our church. So I asked the question right from the very beginning. You can read this in my 90-day plan when I presented to the board as soon as I got there, is what is God already doing in our church? What is God already doing? What is he up to? And when I asked that question, and I went and I met with a lot of leaders and asked a question, I went around to the different ministries and sat in on meetings and observed, I realized that God was already working in amazing ways in our church before I even got there. And one of the ways was through our online ministry, that we were having a huge amount of people watch our service, not just locally, but around the world. And I said, well, that'd be a really quick win if we could turn this online campus to a parent-affiliated congregation. And that's exactly what we did. It didn't cost us one penny, because we were already broadcasting on Facebook Live. And we are reaching people that were physically unable to come to church. We realize that there are a group of people that have mental health issues, that have anxiety issues, that are unable to be in crowds, and that's who was staying home watching. We all have family members, we all have friends, we all have neighbors who don't like going to church, not because of the topic, but because of the fear of crowds. So we created a campus. As we realized the real numbers, and by the way, I got a fly attacking me. There are the numbers that you read on Facebook for viewership on live videos are absolutely incorrect. So don't get real excited when you see 700 people watching your video. On average, there's around 10 to 20 people that watch our services in its entirety each week. And that's what we're looking for, is we're looking for real numbers, because they're real people. So what we've done is we've asked Pastor Todd Brown, who is an ordained elder already in our church, to own this parent-affiliated congregation. He put a team together, and he's meeting the people online. He's getting together names, but we really see the value of our e-gathering campus, not with necessarily our worship service, but we see discipleship as the really big opportunity. Because the more Bible studies that we make available online for people, the more people we're connecting with. Because people want to be discipled, but they need to do it on their terms. They need to do it at night or on the weekend when they have a few minutes here and there. And that's what we realize that we can offer people through this online campus. But there's more, and I'll get to that in a second when I get to another one of the obstacles. The second quick win was we had a nursing home ministry. But the nursing home ministry was more than a ministry. There was worship, there was teaching, and there was mission. And those are the three ingredients of a parent-affiliated congregation in our denomination. There has to be worship, there has to be teaching, and there has to be mission. And so if those three ingredients are taking place, then our denomination has said that is a congregation, that is a church. So Liberty Village Church was our second parent-affiliated congregation, and they average between 10 and 15 people every Wednesday afternoon. And I'm there to serve communion once a month to that group of people. It's led by a lay leader named Sharon, and Sharon has received her lay minister's certificate. Now that's just kind of a minor little detail, but we realize now, a couple months later, that that's actually a really, really big detail. Does anyone know what you have to do to get a lay minister's certificate? You have to apply to the board to get a lay minister's certificate, and if the board approves you, you receive a lay minister's certificate, and then you're promising to complete classes through discipleshipplace.org, which is our continual lay training website. And there's 6 really difficult courses on Wesleyan theology and practice. Now, I realize, as we've now given 3 of these lay minister certificates, that the people that are taking these classes, they are learning very much similar classes to what you, if you're clergy, have taken for the course of study. And it's free, and it's available to anybody, and it's online. And so what we've done is we've allowed this lay minister certificate, the training, to be training to become a campus pastor or a lay minister within our church planting multiplication that we are doing as a church. Because really the second big obstacle that we discovered beyond riskiness is people. Who's going to do it? And I don't really feel qualified. So what we're doing is we're making training available, and what's starting in the future via the e-gathering is we're making training available to be a lay minister and a church planter available through our e-gathering campus. So anybody, regardless of how much time they have on their hands, can learn to become a church planter and a lay minister from their home. And we believe that that is going to be a key to our future of creating a culture of multiplication. Because that training and development piece is critical. We need to train the people that are going to be church planters. And the only way that this really works to become a multiplication network is if we tap into lay ministers. It has to be a lay-driven movement if it's going to be beyond what we currently know. And so I believe that step forward in equipping people to be lay ministers is critical for us to plant churches. Now, we have a third PAC in the very beginning stages, and that is a sports church. It's called Crossover Sports Church. We minister to 200 people every winter via basketball and 100 people every fall in volleyball. Very semi-pro type organization in our church. And what we've decided to do, the emphasis has always been getting people to come from that ministry to our church. And we've had one family, after all of these years, who actually have come to church from these ministries. So we've decided to make the switch and make the ministries the church and reach people where they already are. So think about it. We already minister to 200 people during the winter in basketball every week and 100 people every week in the fall for volleyball. Now we're going to train lay minister chaplains via the lay minister certificate program through discipleshipplace.org to become church campus pastors to minister to the people that are already coming into the building. And once we've established that as part of our culture, that we have a vision for church planting, and the people at Southside believe that that's part of who we are, and look at, we're already doing it because God is already up to these things. Then we believe that we can train and equip more and more and more church planters to plant churches where they already are. And we believe that that's key. So multiplication is very, as you think about multiplication tonight, we have to get it down to lay-driven ministry. And the way that we can get to the lay ministry is to provide training right where they already are. I highly recommend that you look at discipleshipplace.org. Look at all of the free material that's available for your lay leaders to be trained already in ministry in your church, but also to become lay ministers and church planters. And there'll be more and more and more crazy PAC ideas that Southside will do in the months ahead. But the critical piece right now is laying the groundwork. And we think that getting a few PACs started right away, easy ones, no money. And then the other thing was to provide a training program for future church planters. We believe that will kind of be a catalyst for us to plant more churches in the months and years ahead. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. And I want to give you a break. But don't stand up, okay? Keep your places. The break, what I'm going to give you, you have to pay attention because I'm going to ask you something. For the next few seconds, I'm going to use my own language. And then I'm going to ask you if you understand what I said. Are you okay? Take this as a break, okay? It's going to be a break for me too, and I will let you know why. Ok, yo quisiera retarlos de que alguno de estos días, fuera de su iglesia, pongan un letrero que diga, aquí se habla español y adoramos al mismo Dios. You think that's enough? I was preaching in a high school last week, and a couple of the teachers came and said, I get a couple words. What do you say? I didn't ask them which ones. But who wants to be the first?
I speak Spanish.
Okay.
Talking about the church.
Yeah, I was talking about the church.
You talked about God.
Yeah.
You talked about something about the spirit of God in the church.
Well, I was talking about you. Yeah, including the church and all that. Somebody else get
I think there
something?
was something about people not understanding English.
Well, yeah. What I said in Spanish is, I want to challenge you one of those days put a sign outside of your church, will be available to worship God in Spanish. And I will tell you that that's going to create not just interest. And I'm going to tell you, it's not my story. It's part of one of the pastors here in the district, Pastor Tom Govin. They probably you know the story about it. They just realized a garage sale outside of the church, and some Hispanic people stopped to buy some of that stuff, and they asked him if they have services in Spanish. And I don't know exactly what's happening in his heart, but God guided him to start the services in Spanish. Even so, he don't speak any Spanish. How that's possible? The only thing what I can say is, it's possible. As soon as you are obedient, God is going to bring the rest of it. It's the things what I hear from some of the pastors. You know, and I know sometimes those new things sounds like a crazy things. But if it's God who's guiding you to do it, God is going to take care of it. And I think Dr. Rowland was in the church at Lincoln a couple of weeks ago, and seeing 100, how many people? Like 120 Hispanic people getting together. It's a great thing, you know. And if all of us think about how that started, it started just in a little place in the heart of somebody. And I can tell you, I don't know, you don't have to know exactly how many Hispanic people is around your area, but I can tell you, some of that people is going to see that sign and will be interested, because that always calls attention of the Hispanic people. For many reasons, cultural background is one of the things. No matter which kind of faith they profess back in Mexico or wherever they come from, they always look in a place where they can call church. And it's a great opportunity. I can tell you about that. Well, let me talk a little bit not much about me. My name is Elias Cabello. I got the opportunity to be a Hispanic pastor in Anderson First for the last 8 years. And it's quite a bit interesting story how that started. I can tell you, if somebody tells me exactly how was the situation for that church, I never accept it. But I can tell you, God was in that situation. But mainly, I'm part of the results or the effects of the Dr. Rowland heart to support and help the Spanish ministry with Dr. Sol. And it's another man who got a passion for to start new churches. But I'm going to tell you part about what started. When they invited me the first time to meet the congregation, I was very excited. You know, it's nice to hear you're going to be a pastor of a Hispanic church. I was, wow, this is going to be good. And we walk in the room, and then when I find out it's just one lady with 3 kids. That's it. And a bunch of friends outside. Many friends, they want to help us and they want to share with us. One of our best friends give us a great help is Brother Soshiaki. Dick Soshiaki is a great help. And even so, he speaks Spanish. That's a great help. You know, to have somebody to talk in your own language. But when we start there, we start thinking about that's going to be impossible. No matter if we speak Spanish, no matter. But we pray and asking God, if this is something what you want to do, you're going to guide us, you're going to help us. Because this is part of the reality. As soon as you put a sign, probably you saw some of those business places where they put outside a sign that says, "We speak Spanish," and that creates more customers come in, right? And well, we tried that, and pretty soon we find out some people start calling to the church, "What time is the services?" And they find kind of problem. They don't speak Spanish, they cannot answer it. You know, and that was like a snowball, start moving, you know, start getting bigger, bigger, bigger. And when we start this ministry in Anderson, I don't want to say it was easy, it was just taking time. For the first whole year, our attendance was 18 or 20. That was kind of hard. You know, we want to pull more people in. But we find out God called us to be a good testimony in the middle of the needs for the Hispanic community. I'm growing up in Mexico. I'm born and growing up in Mexico. And I'm living in the United States almost for 19 years. And 12 of those years, I was in the process to understand and accept the circumstances or difficulties to get a legal situation. You cannot imagine that, you know. Many things, many feelings in our hearts, in our families, in our family members. But at some point, God used all this in our own life to understand what the Hispanic community are suffering. And one of the main things what we find out is they feel unsafe. No matter. Many times when we talk with Hispanic people in Anderson, and we ask them, "Where do you come from?" They say, "Oh, Mexico." "Yeah, I know you're from Mexico. You speak Spanish." But they don't trust in us when we just started. And then we start feeling like, what's going on? God called us to do this. But then God starts showing us we need to build a trust place for them. And how that happened? We always offering our phone number for anything, no matter what, anything. And I can tell you, some of them, they try it in the middle of the night. Yeah. They said, "Hey, Pastor, I'm calling you because I don't have a ride. I'm working in the third shift. I'm sick, and I need a ride from the place I'm working to my house." And you know what? I tell them, "I'll be there." Many times. I cannot tell you how many times people are calling me from work and asking me if I can go to the school and pick them up, the kids, because they're sick. Many, many times. In other situation, going to the store for you is kind of a simple thing. Get in your car, drive to the store, get your stuff, and driving back. But in a Hispanic community, to walking outside of their houses is a risk, because many of them are driving without license. And that is a different page. Many people ask me why they don't get the license. It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy for you. But I'm gonna tell you two main reasons why they cannot have a license. Because they ask them first, "Give me your birth certificate." It has to be from the United States. They don't have that. Or give me your social security number. But if you don't have a birth certificate because you didn't born here, you don't have a social security number. What that means is impossible. It's impossible. And I got a record of how many miles me and my wife driving with families just to go into the store.
or going to a doctor appointment, or walking with them to the court. And what God gave us through all this is a place where the people can feel saved and worship God. And the great thing is, we're preaching now. Our attendance is between 45, 50, sometimes higher, you know. But God is doing everything. The only thing He asks us is to be available to do it. It's the same thing what I mentioned, what I talk in Spanish. You know, challenge. Do it one time. Google the verse of the Bible in Spanish and put it outside. And see what God's going to show you. Thank you. God bless you.
Well, I'm probably the most unconventional person on this panel in more ways than one, if you know me. But I'm Jill Waltz. I was the children's pastor most recently at Anderson First Church, but I've been in children's ministry for 21 years full-time. And I, many years ago, had gotten my master's in church management. And I've always dabbled in the way the church works. It's always fascinated me. So while I've spent this many years in children's ministry, I always knew that the Lord was calling me to something different someday. And so that someday is now. And as of August 31st, 2016, I resigned my position at First Church and am now speaking, traveling, and preaching, teaching full-time. And I absolutely love what I'm doing. I love this particular season of ministry. I want to talk to you tonight about our opportunities in the realms of social media and our electronic space. I have to tell you how this came about, because if you were to know me, especially during my ministry time at Middletown, you would have asked anyone, they would have said to you, she doesn't know a thing about electronics. She does not know how to hook anything up. I'm like, what's a buffer, woofer, twofer, whatever, and the sound deal. You got all these sound guys who try to speak this language to you, and you're like, yeah, whatever, do your thing, I'll do mine, right? So I stuck in my lane in children's ministry for all of that time. Over the last few years, as I began to study and began to branch out a little bit, I began to realize how limited my scope was. And so when I moved into my position at First Church, I started saying, you guys, why don't we even have a Facebook page? This is like a no-brainer to me, right? Like, hello, even the grocery stores have Facebook pages. So everybody was like, same, we're all in the same boat. We all came at it with the same answer. Well, because I'm already in full-time ministry, and I already have a full-time job in ministry, and you want me to do what else? So I want to say to you tonight, I've been where you're at. And so I understand that many of you in this room are saying, social media is so full of negativity. I want to combat that by first of all saying, so is every other workplace and every other public place and space that you enter into. We are about learning what it means to build bridges rather than barricades. And I believe that that's what social media in particular will allow us to do. But being present in an online space has so many positive implications for the church. Put a couple of handouts on your table there. The first one has 6 reasons why you absolutely must establish an online presence. The second one is just a little helpful tool for you. This is how funny this really is. It's so many things in my life I look back and say, oh, God totally has a sense of humor. Because here's the girl who knew absolutely, positively nothing about anything electronic. I have a book coming out in January on how churches could benefit from the use of social media. So if that tells you, like, I've been where you are, I know and understand what it means to take on something that feels so out of your league. And again, you're in your lane of comfort, right? We all have our area of giftedness and we know our skill sets. And so we approach ministry many times just heading right for that. But I want to challenge you tonight to think outside of that box and to say, okay, I'm going to allow my mind to be stretched tonight as we think about what it means to build a bridge rather than barricades to our church. We have the opportunity to minister in ways that we've never had the opportunity to minister before. If If you think about the way communication has changed over the last 20 years, it is substantially different. The church that I grew up in is no longer the church that the message is still the same, but the methods have changed, right? And so I want to be as effectively using every single tool that I could possibly get my hands on. And that includes things like social media. I want to throw one little caveat out to you, all right, before I forget to say this. Most of the time, most of the churches that I work with will say, we have a social media presence. And then they'll say, will you go check it out? And then I'll get on there and I'll be like, pretty much no. Honest to goodness, just by setting up your little corner in Facebook land does not constitute success. So here's what most churches wind up doing. They say, oh, this is awesome, I have a Facebook page. And so what they do is, every couple of weeks we'll post something on there, and we're going to post something about our Prime Timers group, because everybody knows what a Prime Timer is, right? And then we're going to maybe post something about our Club 456, because everybody knows what Club 456 is. Or we're going to post about the Von Trapp family singers who are coming because they're on tour, and everybody in your entire community knows who the Von Trapp family singers are, right? No, we're posting things that do not make a difference, they're not applicable, and we are thus like shutting down our ability to be effective. So I want to challenge you to really start to think outside the box. And when we talk about what it means to multiply, do you realize that Facebook will have affected today, at the end of today, 2 billion people? Facebook alone. The average person sitting in your church pew, and I don't mean the average 20-year-old, hear me out. The average person of any age sitting in your pew this Sunday will have spent 2 hours per day on social media, which is far more than they're spending sitting in your church pew. So I think that we can use social media for outreach, and I think we can also use it for discipleship. It's a double-edged sword, if you will, of power that we can learn to wield when we learn to do so effectively. I started last month an online Bible study that I'm conducting with my particular, my speaking ministry page, right? I have 82 people participating in an online Bible study. 82 people that I'm having the opportunity to disciple. 82 people who are writing and commenting and posting and who are learning and growing. I have two women who are 80 years old who were both formerly pastors' wives. So you'd think, oh man, they probably know everything about the Bible there probably is ever to know, right? So in some ways it's a little intimidating to me. But these women are writing to me saying, oh my goodness, I never looked at it like this, or I never thought about this. And that is, to me, that's a true testament, a true example of what it means to be discipling other people. So if you just look real quickly with me at this 6 reasons card. The first one is this, connection. I want to tell you, and you know as well as I do, that outside in your community and mine, there are people walking through Walmart that if you were to stop them, they would say, the church only wants my money. The church is full of hypocrites. The church this, the church that. But what if we could learn to begin to chip away at that wall? We break down the barricade, we build bridges. So social media allows us the ability to make connections with people that we never will have had the opportunity to connect with before. At Anderson First Church, I helped them launch their online Facebook Live ministry starting Easter Sunday this past year. And towards the end of the spring, we had a guy who got on in the middle of the service, and honestly, I was a little nervous because I thought, yikes, what's he gonna say? Because he had, let's just put it this way, his Facebook username was an inappropriate word, or like words together made an inappropriate phrase, right? So I'm like Googling and trying to find this guy and like texting other people and finding mutual friends. Long story short, this guy had lost his kids to CPS, was battling drug addiction, and was wanting to know how a gracious and loving God could possibly allow a child to be abused. This guy had legitimate questions. And if our churches aren't safe places for people to be able to ask these questions, we're not doing our jobs. So I think the very first benefit from having a presence on social media is that connection piece there. The second one is this: you become relatable, along the same lines. The third one is this: promotion. I know you'll all hear this language right now, right? Because you're all about free publicity as a church and as a ministry. But that's one of the obvious pieces right there. But I want to caution you again. Buy my book when it comes out in January. You don't only use it for promotion, because that's when people start to tune you up. How many of you, I hope there's nobody in this room, how many of you have friends who sell It Works? Or Platson? Or the Pink Pack? Or like everybody and his dog selling something on social media, right? So what do? You scroll right on past it. You gotta find something that's gonna get people's big fat thumbs to stop on your particular picture, image, or message somehow. Because you're constantly throwing your announcements at somebody who totally doesn't care about your announcements is getting you nowhere. But there is a way to use that to your advantage also. The fourth one is this: you establish credibility. When you are not afraid to be in a public forum and have discussions that matter, you earn credibility. When you're showing up and you're willing to get into conversations with people that you're nothing like them, or that you may not even agree with, you earn great deals of credibility. You'll never have an opportunity to stand in front of your, let's say your high school, most of you won't ever have the opportunity to stand in front of your high school graduation with like 500 people there, right? But you may have the opportunity to engage in a public forum, in an online situation where people are looking at how you respond, and they're saying, oh wait, that's cool. That person was willing to get into this conversation. That person was willing to make themselves uncomfortable for a few minutes to actually talk about this. And that person didn't stomp on somebody else's toes publicly and make them look foolish in the end. I don't know if you heard about the whole Twitter debacle between Wendy's and, I don't even remember who it was now, Wendy's and Burger King, I think it was, going back and forth on Twitter. Was it a barbecue? Okay. So Wendy's makes the claim that their beef is fresh. What's that? Yeah. See, he's on Facebook. Wendy's beef is fresh and never frozen. And so they're back and forth. And the gist of all of this is Wendy's handled themselves appropriately. What they could have done in the middle of a Twitter firestorm is completely disengage. And honestly, that's what as pastors we're tempted to do. We're tempted to say, I'm going to delete that comment, or I'm going to go and hide, I'm just not going to say anything because I don't want to look like a fool. But in the end, Wendy's wound up being the hero of this entire debacle because of the way they entered into the conversation. And they didn't badmouth anyone else. They were just there. They had a presence, and they entered into a dialogue with this other restaurant. The fifth one is outreach. I think there is a potential for us to reach out into our communities like never before. There are creative ways that we can learn how to do that using social media and using the tools that we have there at our disposal. And the last one is this: website traffic. Statistically speaking, people will visit your social media page first, one of your social media platforms. Then they will, second of all, visit your website, your church's website, before they ever set foot in your church. If you think about it, how many of you shop on Amazon? Like, I get my groceries from Amazon, you guys. Like, I'm hardcore, right? So when I'm gonna buy something that I've never bought before, I go on and I read the reviews. That's what people are doing when it comes to our churches too. And when they enter into your social media and they see the reviews on your page and they see the comments and the types of posts that you're making, then what happens is they take it a step further and they go onto your website, because ultimately they want to know what your church is going to be like when they set foot in there on Sunday morning. And so when you can drive them to that website, it's just another step in getting you closer, solidifying the fact that hopefully they will darken your door sometime down the road. But I also want to say this: what if your ultimate goal in developing a social media ministry is not for them to show up at your church on Sunday morning. It really is. But I'm just saying, let's take that off the table for a minute. What if we could really approach it as a ministry? And saying, I don't care about the numbers. I very well may spin my wheels here for a long time. But at some point in time, you have to believe that that person who's seeing what you're saying and the kind of posts that you're making and the way that you're creating a sense of community online, when they see that, they'll know in their moment of crisis where they need to go, right? It's just like any other touch point we have with people. But social media allows us to like blow that up times 10,000. I often think of it like this. The people outside in our communities, I want you to picture them as junior high girls. They're junior high girls walking into the lunchroom, and they don't know where to sit. They don't know where to go. They don't know where they belong. And it's our job to invite them up to the table. It's our job to pull out a chair and to say, you belong here. I was expecting you. I'm ready.
I met with Comcast just this week, and two people from Comcast came into my office and sat down and began to give me their whole spiel about their internet business and everything. And the one rep looked at me and she said, so I was on your internet page and your web page, and I seen that you guys are doing this, this, and this, and this. And I was like, doing searching my web page. But that's what they're doing. They're researching us before they ever walk in the doors. And she knew so much about our church just by going to our website. And one of the reasons I asked Jill to speak, and she's coming back to a skills clinic, I believe. And I want to encourage you to be there for that. I will be the first one to sign up, because I believe that social media is a humongous avenue for church plant. And I was kind of, well, is it good, is it bad, this online, doing Facebook Live for our church service, is that good or bad? And I really went back and forth. And then I watched Kevin, he was doing it, he does it every Sunday, Facebook Live, and all of a sudden he pops up and he says, so share your prayer requests with us, we'd love to pray with you. And boom, boom, boom. And I was moved, and I was convinced from that point on, I'm going to get into this, because I'm going to reach people that I can't reach any other way. I'm going to have a church plant through Facebook. And so that's something that we're hoping to develop. So real quick, before we get into the Q&A time, a couple things that just listening to this panel, aren't they fantastic? These guys and gals. Two very common things that I picked up on is I heard it 3 times. Well, I guess there's 3 things I would say. One is, even though we're leaders, we're followers. Terry gets up and stands here, then the rest of you do. I thought, how unique. But they said, we don't know what we're doing, and yet they're planting. I didn't know what I was doing. I just did it. And the Lord showed me along the way. And I reached out to people that did know how to do it. I reached out to people that have done it. I reached out to people that I knew what they were doing, and because they've been there, done that. And that's kind of the reason I brought this panel in. So you can hear from them. They've been there, done that. And so I just want to encourage you, don't wait, as I think Kevin, one of them said, don't wait till you know what you're doing. Seek, if God has planted that seed in your heart, then seek somebody to help you out. I'm there, I'm available, I'll help you. I know any of them up here on the panel would help you. Dr. Rowland, for sure, I know. He is probably my biggest supporter and encourager in this whole process. And the second thing I seen was church looks different for all of us. I think if church was an ice cream shop, we'd offer one flavor. We're like a one flavor shop. This is what you get when you come in. This is what we offer. you don't like that, we have nothing else to offer. And how many people do we turn away from our churches just because we don't meet their need? When I was a small group pastor, they say statistic-wise that you're fortunate if your church can get 50% participation. So what I did was I took a group of leaders and I said, what are you most passionate about? What are you most passionate about? What are you most passionate about? One might say running. One might say quilting. One might say working on cars. And I would say, okay, now build a Bible study around it. And they would build and grab people and build a Bible study around the things, the activities that they were most passionate about. And we had an 85% participation because we offered variety. And so that's what you see within PAC churches, parent-affiliated churches, or church planting. And I think we have to be creative, and we have to be willing to step outside the box and do something different. Thursday night, no, this is Thursday night, isn't it? Tuesday night, I was interviewing a new worship leader. We had to let ours go a month ago. And I'm sitting outside of a coffee shop, and we're having dialogue, and there's 2 or 3 guys sitting behind me at a table, and all of a sudden I hear Jesus, and I'm like, and they're just sitting there dialoguing about Jesus. And I kind of got lost from my interview here for a second, because all I could do is just try to butt in on their conversation. And as long as I was there for an hour and a half, they're just talking about Jesus. And I thought, they're having church. They're having church. Who knows? For all I know, that was a church plant right there happening. And this guy that was sitting across the table was his first member. We can do church. And I think the more that the more flavors, so to speak, that we offer. When I go to an ice cream shop, I want, give me some flavors here. Give me some toppings. I mean, it's a shipwreck. I'm going to tell you when I'm done with it. But I think that's what people are looking for too. Come to my side, so to speak. Well, let's open it up for question and answer. So you've heard some diversity up here. And one of the things that I didn't hear Paul speak of, unless I missed it, was he also planted a church in a nursing home, correct, Paul? Which I have done so as well. One in a nursing home, one in a high school, sports ministry, and church within a church, within my church. So that's a little bit of my background. So you can, I'll do my best to answer your questions as well. So fire away. Yes?
I have a question for Jill. As far as Facebook, Jill, what advice would you give a church that hadn't used Facebook much in the past, but then they want to transition into using it more for their church? And the reason I'm asking, I'll tell you what happened in our church when that occurred. We had prayer chain. You know, we had certain people that got the calls, and then they, went down the prayer chain and made calls, and that was our prayer chain. When Facebook became real prevalent in our church, that chain broke. It stopped, dead in its tracks. What kind of advice do you give a church to make sure that doesn't happen and the people like me that don't use social media don't get left behind? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a really complex question. So I'm going to do my very best to give you a really quick...
I don't want to overtax you now.
I'm tired. It's late. No. Here's what I would say. You have to begin by asking yourself this question. Who does my social media exist for? So if your social media exists for your church people, then things like prayer chains and whatever are appropriate. But if you're saying, I want to learn to leverage the power of social media as an outreach, it dictates what you're posting, and it completely changes it. So, for people, I think it's Reggie Joyner, or no, it's Andy Stanley, has a saying, do for one what you wish you could do for all. So here's how I would approach that for the people who are not on social media. find other ways to keep them in the loop. But don't not do it because there are people who are not. Because I think it has to be a both and approach, as is anything in ministry, honestly, right? So I would also say Facebook groups are excellent places for you to conduct insider information, where you place things like prayer requests and announcements and things. I've visited Facebook pages before where literally it was come to the potluck, come to the kitchen, and here's the death announcement for so-and-so, here's the obituary for so-and-so. It's like, who in the world would want to visit your church because everybody's eating and dying? Like, that's not appealing to me in any way, shape, or form. So keep that insider information in an insider place, but keep your public page that's more easily accessible and easily found, keep that outreach oriented. Does that answer your question?
Well, kind of, but you know, I think it was a failure to know the audience, okay?
It's a failure to define
That's right.
your audience.
A lot of people have no interest in social media, never intend to use it. So, and most of the time, I think the prayer chain was made up of majority of those type of people.
Sure.
So, Facebook was in addition to what we were already doing, but when somebody posted something on Facebook, you know, of general interest, they felt, well, that serves the purpose, and then they forgot about the prayer chain.
Right.
You know, so you know, when you already have something in place like that, you can't just ignore it and forget about it.
Sure.
You know, you need to supplement it with social media, and that's fine. But
again, I think it is a both and approach. I think you're wise to say, you know, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater
Right.
either. So maybe you look into another way that's going to still meet this particular demographic in your church as well as this particular demographic. Though I think we also have to be super careful as leaders in the church that we're not playing into the consumer mentality that is so often prevalent. So I think it's a slippery slope there too. But.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes, so let's try to direct the question toward church planting if we can for the last 20 minutes.
Just real quick for Jill, you mentioned the skills clinic. Do you have a tentative date yet?
It's spring. It's all now, right?
Okay.
And she will give you tons of information. So hand over here.
Yeah, I'm kind of more like the Facebook stuff, like doing that. I'm trying to get our church more into doing that Facebook church stuff because we do have many people that, like you say, can't get out. And then, when is a possible way, or is it even possible even to count them as part of our numbers for our church yet? Or is that just like we're just waiting to see how it goes along before the church engages that?
Well, yeah, so if you have a PAC Facebook church plant, a legitimate one, the first thing I would encourage you to do is make sure you're able to track the numbers correctly. As someone said up here, might have 300, views, but maybe only 10 or 20 people actually watched it. So I think right now, some of them that have a Facebook church plant, a PAC church, they're waiting to really even record numbers until they figure out a way to really get the true numbers there. And myself, as well as I know many of those who already have a PAC church that is registered in Kansas, I am recording the numbers from my PAC churches, but I am not going to submit them until the end of the year. So, because I don't want my attendance, church attendance, to look like it's 3 times greater than what it is. So I'm only reporting my standard church attendance on a monthly basis, and then at the end of the year, I will give that attendance and then my per PAC church attendances also. Does that clear it up?
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I would also